The mother suffers from an incurable disease, and the family's daily life gradually collapses. The father becomes frantic in despair, and the daughter is forced to become the pillar of the family. Welcome to the Alpha's Love channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Koluji's incurable mother was sick. Father had had her hand gripped in his. His face looked the same as mother's. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Sweaty and grim. Mother was lying on the bed, her breaths every now and then hitching and stopping, then restarting. Her eyes were rolled back into her head, leaving only white in its place. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It scared me, but after a while, I started to get used to the new way that mother slept. Dr. Walt was checking her temperature, feeling her pulse, giving her weird white pills. This wasn't abnormal. This was my daily routine. It started 3 months ago. Mother and I were weeding in the garden. I enjoyed pulling them up but was often scolded by Mother for pulling up the wrong plant. She didn't mind though. I knew she didn't. She would laugh her laugh that made everyone who heard it smile. Her laugh though suddenly broke off with an even coughing. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Climbing onto her back while she hacked whatever was stuck from her throat. It was not common for werewolves to get a ball of fur stuck in their throat, however. Father had told me a story before going to bed of it happening. Mo-I-I-triple-E-E-E. I drawled out, walking to the front of her to see if she had really coughed up a ball of fur. I didn't see fur in her hand though. I saw blood moan. I whimpered, clinging onto her to somehow get the coughing to stop. It didn't though. And in between her coughs and gags, she managed to gasp out an intelligible sentence that I understood. Go cough. Cough. Get hack. More blood fell out of her mouth, Dad. Without thinking I left her there, crouched on the ground, clinging to her mouth, running screaming D-A-D-Y. D-A-D-D-Y. He ran outside, his eyes blazing gold, alert to danger. Then he saw her on the ground and ran to her. He picked her up and ran out of the garden with her in his arms. I stood there staring. They were gone so fast. In my numbness, I sat down and stayed there until the sun slowly came down and the moon rose. I felt hands on me, lifting me and tucking me to bed, however the scent wasn't Mother or Father's. Before my eyes closed, I had one last thought run through my head. Mother is sick. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Poking my head around the door, no reply of acknowledgement was heard. I slowly opened the door more, wincing at the creak that it gave. Cautiously I took a few steps in, waiting for any movement or noise to happen. I breathed a sigh of relief and headed to the kitchen, but I had let my guard down. Before I could react to the sound of running footsteps behind me, I was pinned down, Father on top of me yelling. Where is she? Thea. His eyes were wild, frantically looking everywhere but at my face. Please don't look at me, I pleaded in my head. I've looked everywhere, Fayette, but she still hasn't come home. It's so late. Tears freely flowing from his face now. I tried to reach for the needle in my back pocket. I should have had it out the moment I entered the house. Suddenly he looked down at me. No, my mind whimpered. My father's tear-ridden face lit up, and a smile came on. Darling. Leaning down and peppering me in kisses. Where were you? I've missed you so much and now you're here. We have to find Fayette and celebrate. He jumped off me and started to swing his head around. Fayette, he yelled, guess who's here? I took this chance to grab the needle from my back leg. While he was distracted, I stuck it in his arm, pulling down and letting the clear liquid flow freely into him. Please work fast. He looked down at the needle in his arm. Realization hit him. It should hit him. I did this to him every day, and every time I braced myself for the moment. The horrible moment when it kicked in, his whole face sagged. His eyes dropped into hooded lids and his body hunched over like he had a block on it. He looked up at me with lost eyes. Where's she? Fayette, he whispered. I took my father, the broken man, enthusiasm, in my arms and let him sob on my shoulders. I let him sob there every day. I said in his ears, knowing that by now, nothing I said or did would help. It's okay, Dad. I'm here. You still have me. We have each other. Mom wouldn't want this. She wouldn't want this. But nothing I said reached him. He was gone. I don't know if it started the day she died and he did well hiding it, or if the madness had slowly sunk in. Werewolves could find other mates if one died. However, there were some mates that were for life. These were rare, but my mother and father were life mates. SSCCS, I said again, stroking his hair. It's going to be okay. I don't understand drive. Walt, werewolves can't get sick. My father's frustrated voice rang out from his study. I hid behind the door, putting my ear up to the crack to listen in. There are exceptions, drive. Walt's deep voice answered, your mate has a genetic defect. Something went wrong and now her body is weak and shutting down. A frustrated sigh could be heard. I couldn't tell from who. Can she get through? My father's voice spoke out in the silence, breaking halfway. I jerked my head back. I had never heard my father's voice waver before. It had always been strong and assertive. There was a long break of silence. I put my ear up to the hole, wondering if they had fallen asleep. However, drive. Walt whispered only one word, no. Tears fell freely from my face as Dad held my hand and walked me up to Mother's bed. I didn't want to look at her, but pushed away the thought and instead crawled into her arms. Hey little girl, she said in a whisper. Her eyes followed me as I brushed hair away from her face. Mommy, was all I said. She was too weak to lift her head, too weak to even breath at some moments. I need to tell you something, she whispered. I leaned in closer and whispered back, okay, caught in our bone bubble that we had made. My darling, I need you to remember these words. I nodded, squinting my forehead hard in concentration. She smiled at my expression. Don't give up. Okay, baby girl. I nodded wide-eyed. I want to tell you to be the sun. I knitted my eyebrows in confusion. Listen carefully. Fayette. Be the sun. Please remember that. Be people's warmth even if they are raining on you. Be people's light, even if they are closing you up with dark clouds. And like the sun, always keep going. Don't stop. Don't give up. Be the sun, I whispered, looking her in the eyes. That's right, she breathed, looking up at my father and smiling at him. My father got down on his knees and laid his head next to Mother's. I love you, he whispered in her ear. I love you, Mommy, I whispered also. We both kissed her cheek. I left the room because Father seemed to want to talk to Mommy. As soon as I was out of sight, I ran to my room and wrote down everything I could remember that Mom told me to. When I woke up the next morning, the house wasn't quiet. Since Mother got sick, it had always been quiet so we wouldn't disturb her. The house was loud. I covered my ears, but I couldn't block the heartbreaking howls that were shaking through the house. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. I thought racing to her room. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. But all I saw was Father's tan wolf, with tears dripping down his face as he lifted it to cry his pain over and over. Chapter 1, in which it's a normal day, the alarm jolted me from my sleep. The image of father lying on the ground. I slapped my cheeks in an attempt to regain control of the dream that I had. Every night it was the same since that day. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It used to scare me, waking me up screaming or sweating in the middle of the night. But I got used to it. I accepted that now the dream was a part of me, the deep dark part of me that I could tell no one. Be the sun, I chanted in my head. Be the sun, I said out loud. Through the window, I could see that the sun that gave me so much hope was barely starting to rise. With my alarm set to 5 a.m. in the morning, I woke up and went to sleep in darkness. I quickly got dressed in a blue t-shirt and jeans, finding one of my ratty sneakers under the bed and the other thrown across the room. It was time to make breakfast. The smell of sizzling bacon and rising pancakes slowly woke me up. Feeding the whole pack was hard. It was like feeding a black hole. Everything that was cooked was sucked in and yet still wanting more. Lizzie and Jane soon came to the kitchen, bright-eyed and woken up by their morning chores. "Morning, Fayette," Lizzie said, grabbing the spatula from me and taking over the pancakes. "Lizzie, Jane," I said with a smile. They smiled back. Together we silently worked on feeding our army. There were a lot of early jobs that needed to be done before the pack woke up. Most didn't even know about it and just woke up to the luxury of fresh muffins, clean bathrooms, gear that was polished, rouge prisoners that were fed, and fresh laundry. It was hard. No one would want to go through back-breaking work every day, but someone had to. Those summons were the own gazer. I didn't mind though. I had been in Omega for so long now that I didn't really know how to be anything else. My thoughts always turned to this when I had chores that didn't keep me too occupied. Suddenly I felt a hand pass over my eyes. I smelled the air and smiled. "Breakfast is almost ready, Alpha Bruno. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Turning to face him and give him a morning welcome hug. Alpha Bruno laughed and returned my hug, and then proceeded to ruffle Jane and Lizzie's hair. They didn't mind though. It was already messed up from the work and heat of the kitchen. "I'm so hungry," Alpha Bruno whined. He faked like he was about to pass out, before leaning his body on us. We laughed and complained. All of us knew that the Alpha only acted like this around us, playful and needy. For some reason he let his guard down when we were around. I smiled as Alpha Bruno tried to steal some bacon from Jane, only to be scolded and have his hand slapped. I had known Alpha Bruno my whole life. In a way, he was like a second father to me. He was always with me when I needed help, carrying me to my bed when Mother had collapsed, and letting me cry for hours next to him when Father. I slapped my cheeks again, startling everyone in the kitchen knew. I waved my spatula at Alpha Bruno. "Get out," I playfully teased, swatting my spatula at him. All right. He laughed and gave us one fleeting smile. The moment he walked out of the kitchen though, his face hardened and he became the Alpha. All of us gazer knew he wanted it to be a secret. Even Alpha had to let off some steam and be himself every once in a while. We were all honored, however, that he had chosen us, the lowest of the low, to be a part of such a secret. Breakfast soon was ready and the stacks of pancakes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. And bacon were quickly devoured. Everyone dug and greedy, some starving after a long night patrol, others just because of a good night's sleep. The own gazer and I huddled in the kitchen. There was no such thing as leftovers, so we had to take a cautious amount of food that wouldn't affect the pack, but enough that we could still work. Alpha Bruno refused to let us starve like how some packs did to their gazer. He always came after and made sure we had all eaten. Cooking and serving breakfast made it seem like the day was already over. However, it was just beginning. Remembering that Alpha Bruno had asked if Gazer would polish the training gear and repair it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Everyone looked at me. I could fix almost anything. I had learned it at an early age after all how to take care of myself. Plumbing, electricity, anything really I could fiddle with and work with to make work. The training equipment broke easily due to the pack members getting overexcited and not having self-control. I opened the door and led the other Omega. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Splintered wood and rusty metal sat in desolation. I groaned on the inside knowing this would take all day and night. Be the sun. I turned to Charles and smiled. You'll be okay, Charles. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'll help you if you need it, and I'll do all the hard repairs. Why don't you start by polishing that spear? Chapter 2, in which I get reminded. The best people possess a feeling for beauty, the courage to take risks, the discipline to tell the truth, the capacity for sacrifice. Ironically, their virtues make them vulnerable. They are often wounded, sometimes destroyed. Ernest Hemingway. The repairs to the gear took longer than I thought. It took 3 days. Charles, really. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Shaving off a piece of wood to make a new hoop for the running course. I can finish this on my own. Quickly after starting our cleaning, I found out how hopeless Charles was at repairs and polishing. He kept knocking things over, apologizing profusely and then backing up to knock down another thing, which would then lead to another string of apologies. Even me, known for my patience, was being worn thin. I finally had enough of him getting in my way. I said as sweetly as I could, "You had better being somewhere else. I'm pretty sure the other Ungazer are having a hard time without you." Charles smiled at that. "You should really go and help them," I added, just to drive home what I wanted. Charles agreed with me, knocking down a few arrows in the midst of his vigorous nodding. At the doorway there he paused and looked down at me. "Iwan, Fayette." I looked up, wiping away sweat from my eyes. "I'm going to bring you some food. And water." He smiled at me, leaving me with a silly grin on my face. I was glad that Charles would think of that. I knew he would get food, but it touched my heart to know that he remembered and thought of me. My stomach crumbled in that instant and I laughed out loud. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I had only slept for about 6 hours, before getting up, making breakfast and then heading back to fix the gear. I hid all this from Alpha Bruno, of course. I knew he was kind and wanted us to be okay. But the amount of work us Omegas had to do left us with little time to eat or sleep. My head perked up at the sound of footsteps approaching and then coming down the stairs. Charles is fast when it concerns things, I grumbled in my mind. But it wasn't Charles. It was Anna, and her twin Estella. I put it down to my natural instinct, the wolf part of me that made me stronger and faster, and let me sense when something was wrong. And every time those girls approached me, I felt something wrong. Anna, had red hair and was the youngest twin, while Estella had raven black hair. Besides their color, they looked the same. "Bruno told us you would be here," Anna purred. I bristled at the casual use of Alpha Bruno's name on the inside. My outside appearance was anything but hostile, though. I smiled at the 2 girls, wanting to show them that I was friendly. "Why are you always smiling?" Estella asked. She had a horrible voice that sounded nasally all the time. It hurt my ears to listen to her talk. Before I could reply, Anna, Lee spoke, saying, "She's obviously smiling because she's dumb." Estella said, coming closer to me. It was then that I realized, enthusiasm in the presence of these two groomed girls, how dirty I was. Grease covered me from head to toe and tools laid scattered around me. Enthusiasm in the middle of my repairing. I had taken off my shirt, leaving only my sport bra on. I had used my shirt to wipe my hands. Estella wrinkled her nose at me and confirmed my thoughts. "You smell so bad, Thea, like something died on you." Anna, Lee started to laugh. Estella smiled at her sister and turned to me, continuing her goading in hopes of getting more approval from Anna. "Lee, look at your stomach. New fashion says to be skinny, Fayette, but let's not be sticking bones here. You might be the dying source for the smell." Both sisters crackled up. Well, I sarcastically thought, that hurt so much. I couldn't help but give a small chuckle at Estella's laughing. She sounded like she was the one who was dying. Both sisters immediately sobered up. "Are you laughing?" Anna, Lee asked quietly. "No, I wasn't really, My voice died with their approaching figures. Faster than I could see or register, Estella quickly picked up one of my tools, a screwdriver, and slashed my cheek with the pointed end. Not satisfied enough, she hit my head with the blunt part. I went down, seeing spots in my vision and hearing a ringing noise. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I heard Anna, Lee gasp. "You heard her?" She hissed at her sister. She was laughing at my voice. At the way I laugh. I know she was. Estella motion was going to hit me again, but was stopped by Anna, Lee. At least one of them has brains. I sluggishly thought. Estella, you can't hit her though. Anna, Lee turned to me and her lip curled. Even though she's an Omega, she's not good enough for you to waste your time on her. Estella ran out of the room, throwing the screwdriver at my hunched-over back. I heard the sound of the closing door and gave a sigh of relief. My relief was short-lived though when Anna, Lee's voice startled me back to reality. "I'm sorry," she did that, she whispered down at me. I couldn't believe my ears. I struggled but forced my head to look up at her. She seemed to have regret in her eyes. "Maybe this will remind you of what you are." And with that, she walked out. "Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry," kept repeating in my head. The door opened again and I cringed and curled up in a ball. "No," I whispered in my head. "Don't come back. Please." But a different voice filled my ears. "Fayette." I heard Charles shout and rush over to me. His hands gently lifted me up. I felt a breeze on my face as we left the gear building. Charles was frantically carrying me, but I lost focus of the world before I knew where to, and my vision of grey turned into nothing but black. Chapter 3, in which I burned the eggs they witnessed her destruction, then were left to wonder why. She saw nothing but darkness, though the stars shone in her eyes, but maybe they've forgotten, when they failed to see the cracks, that a star's light shines the brightest. When it's starting to collapse, my mouth watered at the sizzling bacon that was slowly popping every now and then. I was cooking breakfast alone today. Lizzie and Jane each stayed up the whole night due to Beta Ryan needing his files cleaned. It took them all day and night. They were taking a 4-hour nap before finishing the rest of their chores. I turned around at the sound of steps coming into the kitchen. Alpha Bruno walked in and gave me his regular big smile. "Morning, Thea." He came up behind me and set his chin on the top of my head. "Morning, Alpha Bruno," I replied, stirring the eggs, making sure they didn't stick to the pan. Alpha Bruno sighed at the top of my head and asked, "How are you feeling?" Not wanting to answer, Alpha Bruno growled in response and turned me around to face him. "Thayet," he said in a low voice. I asked, "How are you feeling?" I put my head down in shame. Werewolves healed fast, and by the time Charles had reached the pack doctor, my cheek was already healed and I was slowly waking up. However, I felt horrible for the fact that Alpha Bruno was in an important meeting with his beta after it to see me. I had gotten in the way of his duties in the pack. "Werewolves heal fast," I replied, turning around and continuing my stirring of the eggs. "It's all healed and I'm better." Alpha Bruno sighed and said, "You know what I meant when I asked, Fayette." My shoulders sagged. He saw right through me. I could smile all I wanted, tell everyone I was fine and laugh as loud as I could, but he knew the truth with a single glance. I mumbled to the eggs, knowing that he would hear me, but I didn't have the courage to face him. I don't know what I did wrong. Why did they even come down there? How were their hearts so? I struggled to find the right way, but I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to understand why people could be so mean and malicious just for the fun of it. It wasn't the fact that Estella had cut and hit me. I had been hit before for messing up a job or going too slow. What confused me was that they purposely sought me out, and then carried out their cruelty. I felt Alpha Bruno's arms enclose me from behind. I leaned into his chest, missing the feeling of warmth and being loved. "I'm so sorry," Alpha Bruno whispered in a pained voice. He kissed the top of my head and let go, allowing me to finish breakfast. Walking over to the island in the middle of the kitchen, he perched on it and said, "The king sent me a message saying he needs extra hands for the Blue Moon ceremony." I nodded. He had already talked to Guillaume Gaze about it. I wasn't going. I did too much around here. Alpha Bruno cleared his throat and continued saying, "Stacy approached me and told me that she and her mate are expecting a child though." I gasped in excitement. "Stacy and Bill are expecting." I did a happy dance with the stirrer in my hand. Alpha Bruno laughed. "Yeah, well," she asked if she could stay. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I was against it, but with the recent event on you, I'm thinking otherwise. I turned to Alpha Bruno confused. Where is this going? Narrowing my eyes in his direction. "Thea," Alpha Bruno ran his hands through his hair and said, "I don't feel comfortable keeping you here. I can't stand the thought of someone hurting you when I'm just a building away. I would feel better if you took Stacy's place and went with the other Omegas to help with the Blue Moon ceremony at the palace." I stood staring blankly at Alpha Bruno. "Your eggs are burning," nodding in the direction of my pengage. I quickly turned off the stove and tried to scavenge what I could. While I saved my eggs, exclaimed to Alpha Bruno, "I can't leave. Who will cook breakfast?" "Stacy will," he interrupted me, saying, "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "Then who will shop for? Stacy can do that too." "Then who will file, Fayette? You do know that Stacy is not the only Omega here, right?" "I'm only taking 5 of you to help with the ceremony," Alpha Bruno said, interrupting me again. "Fine. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Then a thought came into my head. But who will do the repairs? Alpha Bruno stopped with his finger pointed in the air like he was about to make a statement. His mouth was open but nothing came out. A look of deep concentration soon came over his face. A smug look came over my face as I watched his struggle. Finally, Alpha Bruno sighed. "Fayette, can you please just go help? Leave for a bit. Experience the palace. Have fun with Lizzie and Jane. They won't work you so hard there, and you'll be safe." Alpha Bruno looked down at me with pleading eyes. "Please just do this for me, Fayette." I looked away. I would do anything the alpha asked. He didn't use his alpha voice, the one that made us obey whatever, whenever on me. I know he didn't use it because he treasured me, respected me. And I could count on one hand how many people did that. Looking at him, I gave a small smile. Okay. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'll go. Chapter 4, in which I am consumed. Bad dreams go away. Good dreams, please stay. The Blue Moon ceremony happens once every 15 years. I would have been for when the last one happened. Thinking back, I don't remember it. That was a time when things were good. When my world was whole and I had people who loved me. When I was too young to know the word starve or work. I imagine that Mother and Father sat on the back porch so we could watch the moon. Me in Mother's lap, while Father ruffled my hair with affection, still able to remember me and love me with his whole heart. Closing my eyes, I can still hear Mother's laughter ringing. I like the chirp of a bird, with Father's deep voice accompanying it. The sound was the best music I could wish for. My fantasy was cut short abruptly by Lizzie's violent shakes and squeals. Oh my gosh, Fayette. She jumped up and down, grabbing my hands, forcing me to put down the clippers that I had in my hand and jump with her. Alpha Bruno just told me you're going with us. She squealed again and hugged me tightly. I hugged her back. I was always desperate for love and attention but was good at hiding it. She pulled away to smile at me. I'm so glad. I was going to ask Alpha Bruno if you could come, or if I could stay with you. She started to stroke my head affectionately. I didn't want to leave you here with people who could hurt you. My emotions almost overwhelmed me. To hide the tears that were threatening to overflow, I quickly hugged Lizzie. She laughed and gave me a tight hug back. Thanks, Lizzie, I whispered. No problem, my little sunshine, she said, laughing. We sat down on the porch to the pack house. I had been trimming the bushes before Lizzie arrived, but decided a break was needed. I'm so excited you're going, Lizzie gushed. And maybe if we have time off from work we can catch a glimpse of the prince. Lizzie mimicked the emotion of swooning. I laughed at her silliness. I thought the prince was doing a travel around the world or something. Lizzie's eyes brightened at the question. Yes, she said. The prince is so romantic. He's traveling around the world to find his life mate. Lizzie started to squeal again. I smiled at her. I loved it when she got excited and crazy over meaningless topics. In some ways, it helped all of us gays stay a little sane and remember that there was to life. I got lost in thought while Lizzie explained all the places the prince had been to. So he was searching for his life mate. I think I vaguely remember hearing that. When you're Anna Mega, though, reading through Werewolf Weekly wasn't high on the list of things to do. Life mates for werewolves were rare and hard to find. Alpha Bruno told me one time that only 14 of werewolves found their life mate. Most people define the love of their life, just not their soul mate. Mother and Father were life mates. I mused. I winced at the end of their love story, though. I registered Lizzie's voice, jerking me out of my train when she said, when he came I was so excited and nervous wait, I interrupted. When who came? The prince, Fayette. Lizzie sighed and said, he's so dark and handsome and didn't speak but. What do you mean the prince came? When did the prince come? Lizzie looked at me with blank eyes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'm pretty sure he came at the beginning of his search. 2 years ago. Giving me an uncertain look. I never met him. I yelled. Where was I? Lizzie gasped and then started to laugh hard. Oh, Fayette, she said, between gasps of breaths. Don't tell me you were working while the prince came. Lizzie leaned down and couldn't talk anymore with the hysterical laughter that had taken over her. You're I grumbled. Boo-hoo me. Missed the prince while I was working. I smiled at Lizzie, who was still laughing and wiping tears from her face. I'm sorry, Fayette, she gasped. Only you. This could only happen to you. I couldn't hold it back anymore. Her laughter was infectious. I burst out laughing myself. I was probably cleaning the toilet. I gasped. Lizzie laughed harder. Then it's a good thing you didn't meet him. We couldn't talk after that. I laughed so hard my sides started to hurt. But we still kept laughing. It was the fact that we were able to laugh. Able to sit on the front porch and be like this that made me not want the moment to stop. I only disobeyed Alpha Bruno's orders once. Only once in my life did I go against what the Alpha wanted. Don't give him what he wants, Fayette, Alpha Bruno said, looking down at me with burning gold eyes, letting me know that his anger was getting to him. I nodded. I won't, I whispered. Alpha Bruno sighed and gave me a hug and then left me to go to bed. That was the only time I disobeyed the Alpha's orders. I walked inside the house, cringing at the creak the door made. I said, into the darkness. A huddled figure gave a slight movement. I walked up to it and crouched down. My love, you came, my father weakly said, stroking my face. I watched as tears slowly trailed down his face. I pulled a needle with clear liquid from my back pocket and inserted it into him. The effect was immediate. His face fell when he realized it was me. Dad. Thea, he whispered back to me. We both stared at each other. I knew he was waiting for the drug to wear out so that he could go back to his delusional state. I took a deep breath. I found what I was looking for in his eyes. I have what you want, Father. For the first time in a long time, I saw something in my father's eyes. Hope. I was jerked awake. I heard a desperate whisper, one full of pain and sadness, say, Thea, you need to come with me. I was led to the house. The door opened with a creak. I didn't call out for Father. He was right there, lying on his side, staring at a picture of Mother. Scattered around him were empty needles. Thea, I'm so sorry. My head didn't register the voices though. I slowly walked up to the fallen man. The last thing he saw was her, not the picture of us. I knew the guilt was too much for him, the fact that he was leaving me. The fact that he had asked me to help while abandoning me to the too cruel world. Suddenly I heard screaming. I felt a prickle of pain on my arm as I looked down and saw a needle with clear liquid in me. Oh, I thought, that was me. I woke up screaming and covered in sweat. I quickly covered my mouth though. How long have I been screaming? Did anyone hear me? I sat there calming myself for a long time. My heart rattled in my chest, never quite getting back the beat it needed. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Why, yes, I answered, startled. Hey, Fayette, I heard Jane's voice say behind the door. We're leaving in an hour for Breen Castle. Just wanted to let you know. I heard Jane's footsteps walk away. Trying to take deep breaths, my stuttering heart would not be still. It had been a long time since I was tortured by my own mind. Chapter 5, Alto August. What's the difference? I asked him. Between the love of your life and your soulmate. What is a choice and one is not? SHOUTTO toxin flame, you're amazing. GDINPOV. I'm not sure we should keep going. I looked up at my mate in confusion. Her eyes were scrunched together tight. A cute sign that told me she was in deep concentration. I could feel through the bond, waves of concern and doubt, flooding into me and mingling with my own thoughts, making me confused. I stood up and brushed the dirt away from my pants, slowly reaching for her hands. Why would you think that? Taking her hand and leaning my cheek against them. Her expression still etched itself with concern, but I could tell through the bond that my touch was relaxing her. She let out a deep sigh and took a few steps closer to me, allowing me access to wrap my arms around her and bury her in my chest. I moved my nose up and down her neck, breathing in her scent. I laughed out loud, knowing she had forgotten the question I had asked a few moments ago. Straightening her out so that she was looking at me, I stared into my life mate's eyes and asked again, "Why do you think we should stop?" Crystal's eyes misted over. I knew then not to play with her. She was serious. Before I could embrace her again in comfort though, she let out a small sob and said, "I know it's hurting him." I didn't need to ask who. Our mission. The prince. We both stared at each other. Crystal grabbed my hands and held them close to her. "Gavin, can't you see that every town we go to, every pack we meet with, every girl we look at, all of it is getting to him now?" Tears were threatening to overflow from her. "It's hurting him. So much. After 2 years, I've lost count of how many girls' eyes he has looked into. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Stroking my mate's face. "How can you possibly tell that our prince is hurt? To me he seems to be doing all right," and my voice faded at the look Crystal was giving me. "You don't see it," she growled at me. I looked at her lost. "No," I replied. "I don't." Crystal shook her head. "Has he always been silent?" "He is a soldier born and raised, Crystal. He talks only when he needs to." Crystal gave me a doubtful look. "And does he always just?" To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. With no emotion. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. So this was where she was getting her basis for her argument. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Here's... Soldier, how can I stress this to you? I have known Prince August since he was a pup. He learned to keep his emotion in check so he could be stronger than everyone. Tower, I looked at her to see if she understood. I think it's because he hasn't found her yet. Crystal said to me, "No, Apple, trust me. He's always been like that." Why is this even a ritual that the heir must go through? Crystal muttered under her breath. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I didn't want to agree with her, but secretly I did. The first ever Wolf King's reign was with a life mate by his side. After realizing that a life mate had played a part in making his rule strong, the first king put in a passing ritual that all heirs who were taking the throne must proceed to undergo. At the age of 20, they must go and travel for at least 2 months to find their life mates. No punishment would fall unto them though should they fail to find their mate. No king since has found one, and the prince has been searching for his for 2 years. I sighed at how extreme and diligent he was. Of course, along the way he had set up relations and negotiations with various wolf packs around the world. But many called him a fool behind his back for what seemed like his impossible quest. My head turned at noise to my left. Facing it, I saw Prince August himself come out of the forest. He had sweat dripping all over him. Another hard day of training, I thought. He truly was a warrior. Crystal perked up and went to greet him, asking if he wanted water and some apples. When I first introduced them at the beginning of the quest 2 years ago, Crystal had been nothing but scared. Intimidated by the tall, tan-skinned and black-haired man, she was barely able to speak to him, let alone be in the same room as him. His looks were menacing, but it was the aura that he emitted that had caused her to faint when she first heard him talk. He had simply asked for the salt, saying that one word to her. Yet everything he said was done in such a commanding and powerful way that the mere words Salt uttered from his lips had sent her gasping in a faint. I still teased her about it to this day. Watching now, I was glad that through the years my apple had gotten used to him and treated him almost like a mother would a child. He should have a mother figure to look up to, I sighed inwardly. Both of them approached me then. I had been too busy thinking of the past to notice what was going on with the bond. A wave of smugness and satisfaction was coursing through her eyes, dancing between "I told you so" and concern. Looking between the two, I raised one eyebrow, waiting for someone to say something. Finally August spoke. "I'm going home." Chapter 6, in which I bleed. While they all fall in love with her smile, she waits for one who will fall in love with her scars. The dreamer, it had been a month since Alpha Bruno had left us at the palace. The awe and splendor of it still had my head reeling when I walked through the halls. Gold seemed to frame every inch of the white polished stone. And then there were some halls that were red and jeweled, some that were carved in nothing but the darkest of stone, and even still halls that had paintings swirling on the ceiling and through the walls, depicting stories and tales. The first few days it had been a distraction to me. I wanted nothing more than to just explore the grandeur of it all. Soak in the architecture, ask whoever how such a feat as building this structure was possible. But I wasn't able to. When Alpha Bruno brought us, I felt that not much would need to be done, since the Blue Moon ceremony was a month away. Surely the castle had taken the necessary precautions and had the majority of what they needed to be done by now. But I was wrong. When we arrived to chaos and disorder. Since the ceremony only happened once every 15 years, not many of the servants and decorators knew what to do or how to set up. "Who knows how to work wiring?" one man screamed. He was running frantically from one end of the room to the other. However, his plea was met with shaking of heads and "Sorry, not me." Alpha Bruno pushed me up to the man and, with one hand on my shoulder, called attention over to me. The man rushed over, slightly large and breathing heavily with a red face. "My pack member knows how to work with wiring," was all Alpha Bruno said, before giving me a slight nudge and releasing me to the man. The other gazer that came Charles, Jane, and Lizzie, quickly went to work. Lizzie and Jane, my assistants of sorts. With them, we set up the light show that would take place during the ceremony, the lights leading up to the castle and the lights surrounding it. Through the next weeks, I learned the name of the man who first approached me. He insisted that we call him Mr. Obi. "Amazing," he breathed, as I fiddled with the box to get the lights to switch on and change color. "Where did you learn to do all this?" I smiled at him. I had grown to like Mr. Obi. He was a kind man and didn't treat Jane, Lizzie and I with any harshness. "I'm just good with my hands, I guess. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Milburn, hearts that thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Lizzie approached us and heard the last part of our conversation. "She's not only good with hands," she said excitedly, "Mr. Obi, did you know you were looking at the inventor of the Lizzie?" I cut her off abruptly. Lizzie looked startled and then stared guiltily at me. "I need the new lens for the lights on the balcony. Would you mind grabbing them?" I asked as sweetly as I could so I wouldn't hurt her feelings more. Lizzie nodded and mouthed a quick sorry before running off to get the lens. I turned to Mr. Obi and smiled at his curious gaze, then went back to working on the sequencing for the light. I didn't want it to be too much and obscure the blue moon that would be hanging in the sky, but Mr. Obi had said that the king and queen thought to just stare at a moon all night, and so wanted other entertainment provided. I could still feel Mr. Obi's gaze on me and decided to look up at him again and smile. With a confused expression, "I don't understand. The light sequence." Trying to veer off the topic that I knew we were coming to, No, mister, Obi said, shaking his head and gazing at me even more intently now. I don't understand how you are an Omega. I laughed and continued fiddling with the box, even though the sequence for the lights were perfect and in place. On the inside, though I felt uncomfortable, go away, I wanted to yell. But I held my ground and continued smiling. Why is it that someone who is on par, no mister, Obi stopped to correct himself, who is even better than our electricians and engineers, those who have been royally hired and trained, is an Omega. I stopped my hands with their work and set down the box. I knew he wouldn't stop his questioning unless he had an answer, mister. Obi was a man of invention and brain. Like me, he needed to know the solution to the problem. Why I wasn't being sent to an academy and then back to the palace to serve my king. Why I wasn't promoted in the pack for my skills. Why instead I was beaten and kicked, spit on and despised, deemed unworthy when in reality I could outthink and outmaneuver all of them. I felt a darkness creeping into me, one that I was familiar with. One that I never liked the feeling of, be the sun. I got up and walked to Mr. Obi, stopping until we were barely a foot apart. Quietly I said, Mr. Obi, all my apologies, sir, but you don't know the first thing about my life or what I've done to be what I am today. I looked at him with burning eyes, trying to make him understand with those words. I saw the click go off in his eyes. Suddenly he took a step back. I felt a small part of my heart chip off. You, mister. Obi started to sweat profusely, as he continued taking more steps back. What did you do? He hissed at me. What horrible thing did you do to become this? He didn't wait for my answer. Instead, he turned around with a distorted face. Not before spitting. Stay away from me, Omega. I stood there and watched him leave. Lizzie came up behind me. She silently stood by my side as we both watched the retreating figure. Without saying a word, she leaned her head down and placed it on my shoulder. I rested my own head on hers and took a deep breath. He left, I said in a small voice to Lizzie. I heard, she answered back. We stood like that for a while, getting curious glances from workers as they passed by. But for just a moment, I needed to stop and let my bleeding heart stop its stutter. I heard Anna, Lee's voice in my head. Maybe this will remind you of what you are. And then I heard Mother's voice. So fragile and faint now. Just a whisper to me, but I could still draw it and remember. My darling, you must be the sun. I took another deep breath and another. Then Lizzie and I broke off. We need to work. I smiled at her. Fear. Lizzie hesitantly spoke and looked at my eyes with sadness and regret. I shouldn't have said anything. It's my fault he left and was like that. I just got excited and words started pouring out of my mouth and... It's okay, Lizzie. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Patting her on the shoulder. Lizzie bit her bottom lip and looked down at our shoes. I was just so happy that people were finally starting to realize how wonderful you are. I laughed out loud and embraced her. I love you, Lizzie, I said without thinking. Lizzie laughed with me and hugged me back. I loveyoufayett, she screamed. Some disgusted groans and a few gaps of horror could be heard from the workers who were in the ballroom watching our public display of affection. I looked around in alarm and whispered to Lizzie, You know this is sister love, right? Lizzie mocked a hurt look and put a hand over her heart. She rejects my love. How quickly you dismiss what we have. I giggled and burst out laughing. Other workers started in on the fun. Some catcalling, others yelling at me playfully to accept Lizzie's poor love. The fun stopped though with the man in charge of overseeing, Mr. Joseph, running in and yelling, THEPRINCISHERE. He ran around the room frantic, yelling the words over and over. The print. Lizzie said, confused. but we set up a ceremony thinking that the prince wouldn't be here. She looked at me, but my only response was to shrug Mr. Joseph kept running around, yelling that a throne chair needed to be added for the prince, a place at a table needed to be set, and several important guests were with him that also needed seats. The whole room burst into chaos then as the month of work quickly fell down the drain, turning into a week left to get the ceremony ready. Lizzie and I quickly ran down the stairs. After listening to Mr. Joseph explained that the lights needed a certain color added to them, thus messing up the entire display. Maybe we'll get to see the prince. Lizzie squealed. Doubtful, I answered. I thought of my encounter with Mr. Obi. Why would the prince want to talk to an Omega? Chapter 7, in which I am interested, and never could I have known the taste of heaven. Had I not swallowed pieces of hell first? EBM, I couldn't keep my excitement at bay. My hands were shaking, my head moving back and forth in the same restless movement as my feet. I needed something to do. Lizzie was gone doing who knew what chore. I had the light sequence, the show, the walkway, the gardens, all of it was perfect, Mr. Joseph paid me the highest compliment I had ever received when I showed him my work. He simply took my hand, kissed it, and said, "Brilliant." The atmosphere had changed drastically since the printer's arrival. Instead of the chaos and random bursts of hyperventilation and tears, there instead seemed to be a calm over the castle. The staff knew it, and I knew it. We were ready for the ceremony. I saw Izzy then down the hall, struggling to walk straight with piles of vegetables stacked in her arms. "Lizzie," I yelled, running to her. She turned around to me and smiled. "Come to help finally." She joked. I gave a small chuckle before reaching for the carrots and potatoes piled in a basket, leaving her the lettuce. "Come on then," Lizzie said, motioning for me to follow her. We went to the kitchen and deposited all the vegetables. "Do you need help peeling?" I asked one of the cooks. We had only added to the enormous amount of food sitting waiting to be washed and cooked. "Get out of my kitchen," he yelled, brandishing his knife that he had been using to cut carrots. Lizzie stuck her tongue out at the man and wiggled it in his direction. No need to be rude, Lafair. Lafair continued growling at us and waving his knife, but I knew now with Lizzie's playful banter that he meant no harm. "Have you girls explored the castle yet?" he asked us. We both shook our heads. Between creating the lights and cleaning for the Blue Moon ceremony, not much free time was left for fun and venture. "Go on then," waving his knife in the direction of the door. "I'll give you an hour break before I put you to work on them." He motioned towards the potatoes. Lizzie quickly grabbed my arm and dragged me out of the kitchen. "This is our chance." She squealed. "Chance for what?" Tugging at my arm, trying to get her to release it. Lizzie turned to me and said with an earnest voice, "We can go spy on the prince." I gave her a scolding click and swatted her hand from my arm. "We can't just go and look in on the prince," I said to her. "Oh my gosh, Fayette. He's so gorgeous." "Maybe he's training." She had a wicked gleam in her eyes. "Lizzie," I moaned, "you've only seen the prince for what? 3 seconds. That's not enough judgment to go off of. You probably just exaggerated how he looked in your mind." Suddenly Lizzie stopped abruptly in the hallway and turned quickly around to face me. "Wait." Her mouth gaping open in shock at a sudden revelation that had occurred to her. "Have you ever seen the prince before?" I looked away guiltily in a different direction. Fayett. Lizzie screamed. "Tu es agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Lilbay. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I yelled. "I haven't seen him, okay?" "No, I don't know what he looks like." "We have to go find him right now," Lizzie said in a hurried single breath. She grabbed my arm again and we were racing down the hall. We stopped when Lizzie saw Mr. Joseph. Mr. Joseph. Lizzie waved her hand in greeting at him and dragged us to be closer, Mr. Joseph turned around and raised an eyebrow. Not working girls. I gave an audible gulp, but Lizzie bravely stepped forward and explained. The fair gave us an hour off. We were wondering if the prince was around. I gasped out loud at Lizzie's boldness. Lizzie. I screamed in my mind. You can't just ask about the prince's location like that, Mr. Joseph chuckled at us though and directed us to another man. This is George, Mr. Joseph said. He can tell you everything that is about the prince and the kingdom. Lizzie and I looked at George. He stood stiffly straight up. Thank you. So very kind, sir. He said to Mr. Joseph, Mr. Joseph nodded and whispered to us. Yes, do try to have fun, girl. Before walking away. Lizzie and I turned back to George, who was still standing at attention. Hello, Lizzie said, putting out her hand in greeting. George looked at it and then stiffly shook it, giving it a quick jerk before letting go. I'm Lizzie and this is Fayette, she said, motioning towards me. I nodded my head in greeting, having a feeling that George didn't want to shake hands again. Right, George said, getting straight down to business. What is it you would like to know? Where's the prince? Lizzie blurted. George did not blink at the question. He developed a very serious look on his face and said, Unfortunately, the prince does private training for the majority of the day and does not permit anyone to disturb him. Lizzie had that gleam in her eye again. Well, we need to see what the prince looks like. This girl, she pointed to me, hasn't a clue about his appearance. George gave a shocked look in my direction. Maybe there's a picture of him somewhere. Lizzie suggested. George shook his head in a grave way. I had a slight feeling from him that he was taking our problem and making it a bigger issue than need be. Unfortunately, there are no current portraits of the prince. The most recent one we have is of him on his 12th birthday. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylen Nilbe, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Why has he had no portraits done since then? George shook his head gravely again. No painter has been able to stand in his presence for that long to complete a painting. Lizzie and I gave each other confused looks. They call him the Stone Prince, George said to Lizzie and I. Awe and fear mixed with his voice. Again Lizzie and I gave each other confused looks. The Stone Prince. I whispered questionably to Lizzie. It's probably because of his ABS. She whispered back. What? George sputtered at Lizzie. No, Lizzie said, giving him a questioning gaze. Maybe he likes. That's too much, I suggested. I said stone, not stoned. George said, breaking his stiff form and throwing his hands in the air frustrated. He moaned his regret at ever deciding to engage us in conversation. Okay then. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylen Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Knowing George wasn't taking our joking too well. Why is he called that? Because, straightening back up in his stiff stance, his face never changes. It's like it's been chiseled in stone. He only has one blank expression that he wears. Lizzie and I stared at George, who now seemed satisfied that he had made his point across about the prince. George turned away from us, walked off. I could tell he didn't want to continue associating himself with us anymore. What do you make of that? I asked Lizzie. Lizzie mused. He did see. Like when he came to the pack during his search. She looked up at me with doubtful eyes. Maybe he's shy, I suggested. Garth, Lizzie said. Oh, I said, thinking it through. It could be like with Alpha Bruno. You know how he has two faces? One that's hard and powerful for the pack, but another that's his real self that only we see. Lizzie's eyes gleamed. My dear Fayette, wrapping her arm around my back and leading me to the kitchen. I think you've just figured out our prince. Before we could reach the kitchen, though, we were interrupted by a small cough. It was a delicate cough that I guess the person did many times before finally catching our attention with it. We turned around at the noise and saw a woman in a huge flowing green dress that shimmered when hit upon with sunlight. Only one such person could be wearing something so fine. Ahem. Giving her small cough again. I'm looking for a Fayette. She looked between the two of us with a small smile on her lips. Our lack of answer, though, made the smile transform into an ugly scowl. Don't you two girls know how to address your queen? Chapter 8, in which I'm dressed. Keep your face always toward the sunshine, and shadows will fall behind you. Walt Whitman. Be the sun. The thoughts whirled in my head as I walked down the halls numbly, following the queen in green. I couldn't think as to how that could apply to the situation, though. If I was being honest, I had no idea what was going on. I'm looking for a Fayette. The dainty voice rang in my head. What does she want with me? Don't you two girls know how to address your queen? I couldn't even remember her name. When I was small, when the world was right, I remember looking at pictures of the queen with mother. She was an elegant lady, exotic looking with tart skin and dark hair and bright eyes. I remember her name, Queen Isadora. She died before I was born when the prince was still an infant. I remember mother saying it was a sad day. The people of the land wore the queen's color green to honor her. The king's howl of sorrow could be heard across all packs. What happened? I remember asking mother, touching the picture of the beautiful woman. At the time I didn't know it, but looking back, it was clear to see mother's hesitation of if she should tell me the truth or not. Looking at the picture, mother touched my hair and said, "Some bad men came to take the prince away, and the queen became a mother." I didn't understand what mother had said. I just nodded and continued looking at the beautiful woman in my hands. I adored Queen Isadora when I was little and was horrified to find out that the king had already married another woman. Queen Cora. I heard the news, even as an Omega, when Queen Cora was banished from the land for her adulterous acts. And now for years after that incident, the new queen was in place. I studied the back of her while we walked down the halls, going to an unknown destination. I could vaguely remember her name, but being an Omega, I didn't keep up with the royals and happenings of politics. When I did go to school, I would always be in the labs. I never worked with history. She's young, but looks could be deceiving. This queen looked as if she was still in her 20s, whereas the king rightly should be in his 50s. What is her name? Frustrated with myself. Even if I'm just an Omega, I should still be able to know the royal family's name. But everyone just referred to them as the queen or the king and the prince, with no real name included. It made me wonder if that was their name. The queen glanced at me and smiled, motioning for me to come along, where I kept my same pace behind her. Her smile never faltered, but she let out sing, song, F, a street. I quickly moved my feet so that I would be positioned, still slightly behind her, but further than I was before. Here we are, the queen said again in her little sing-song voice. I tried to keep a calm face as I entered the room behind her. I still had no idea what was going on. Without my voluntary consent, a small gasp escaped from my mouth. A satisfied look came across the queen's face. She raised her arms and motioned towards the rows and rows of dresses and clothes that lay before me. I'm going to need you to choose one for tomorrow's ceremony. I felt like my eyes were bulging out of their sockets. Me, a dress. I stared numbly at the queen, with her staring back before she let out a loud sigh and said, I said choose. So choose. I still didn't move from my position. I had to take a few measured breaths and swallow a few times to make sure my throat wouldn't close up before I spoke. What? Was all I managed to choke out. The queen gave an impatient sigh. I was starting to understand her personality a little better. This is apparently a tradition that Queen Isadora started. The Queen gave a quick huff at the name before moving on. During each Blue Moon ceremony, the Queen is to ask the who contributed the most in their service to the King and Queen. The Queen walked a few steps towards a rack of silver gowns, touching them and testing the material with her thumb before speaking again. Mr. Joseph said your name, so as a reward you are to attend the ceremony. However, he did voice a concern for your attire. The Queen turned to me then and motioned again to the materials hanging. So choose. Baton. Queen, I stated nervously. Her eyes narrowed at me. I could tell she was hardwired to be doing other things, rushing around, being busy, and was not used to being held up. I'm in charge of the light show, so I can't really be at the ceremony because I need to be in it. I snapped my fingers, a nervous habit. The Queen made an impatient sigh and said, just go for as long as you can, eat for as long as you must, dance for however much you're allowed, and don't mess up whatever part you have. She looked at me, and to my hand that I was snapping. Stop that. I immediately stopped. I'll give you a Bluetooth clip so you can talk while at the ceremony. I'm sure you have an assistant of sorts who's able to program also. The Queen gave me a hesitant look before saying, you were chosen by Mr. Joseph for a reason, and the King and Queen greatly honor your hard work. Faye. Tomorrow night I will try to make as magical for you as possible. I stared numbly back at the Queen. The hard expression returned in her eyes, and she walked forward to the dress rack. This is all leftover clothes that once belonged to the Queen's or Highleys. The Queen curled her lips in disgust at the last words. But we should find something for you. We found nothing. The Queen had called in 5 of her maids to come help in the search. But the dresses were either too big. The color was not right. The bust was not good. No way are you going out in that piece of cloth. The Queen shouted once. We finally were down to 2 dresses, and both of them I did not like. Neither did the Queen. She frowned at the results of our 2-hour search. This is it. Look back and forth to her maids. They all shuffled their feet and nodded, looking down. It's too late to order something dear, so choose from the 2. The Queen told me. Throughout the 2 hours, I had somehow gotten to know the Queen more than I had thought I would. She in the process had developed a nickname. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It startled both her and me. But after a while, the name rolled off her tongue and sounded natural. One of the dresses was green, so I knew instantly I could not choose it. The other was an ugly pasty orange that I could never understand why anyone would choose to make a dress out of. Wait, one maid called out. We all turned our heads to the glimmer of hope that one word brought us. In her hands were 2 dresses. Both were gorgeous, but only one caught my eye. I'd choose the pink one, dear, the Queen said. I'm the light pink. No, I breathed. I stepped forward and grabbed the other dress from the maid. What? The Queen sputtered, at a loss for the first time I had seen her. You want that yellow one? I looked down at the yellow dress. It was beautiful, with no straps, and an intricate embroidery design along the top, half and down the middle, leaving flowing light yellow material to surround it. Be the sun. It's perfect, I breathed. Try it on and let us see first, dear, the Queen said, doubt lacing her voice. I quickly stripped, used to it now after doing it so many times in front of the women, and allowed the maid who helped find the dress assist me in zipping it. The women stepped back and looked. I heard some gasps as I turned in a slow circle for them. Yes, the Queen said, nodding, with the maids giving thumbs up behind her back. Yes, dear. It's perfect. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.